case, in fact, in all countries, I think, with the exception of Angola, where there was no noticeable difference between a trained teacher and an untrained teacher by Save the Children. Teachers trained by Save the Children were more likely to have a lesson plan, we found, more likely to address students by name, more likely to praise them, to ask individual questions and open-ended questions, and less likely to use corporal punishment. But the evaluation also found that there was really no formal follow-up, so after the training program it wasn't clear really how teachers were utilizing, we weren't tracking how teachers were utilizing that training in the classroom. In terms of teacher professional development, which was the focus in Angola, there was evidence that we had worked well with local education authorities to develop a system of teacher supervision and support. And most teachers have reported that they had been observed by supervisors and that supervisors had rated their teaching performance. But the evaluation findings did find that there was really a lack of participatory teaching methodologies amongst trained teachers and amongst the trained supervisors. So despite the fact that there was training, you know, one of the more important aspects of our training had not actually made it through to the classroom. And in Angola, in particular, there was a high level of teacher absenteeism that was observed. In terms of learning, in all the country studies, there was a significant portion, between 1/5 and 1/2 of grade 3 students, who were unable to read a single word from a simple text. Students who did not participate in the learning were often ignored and rarely given extra support. So in the classroom, the teacher tended to focus on the more actively engaged students, and those that were not actively engaged didn't get a lot of attention from the teacher. So over time, this is a concern, because if they're falling kind of under the microscope in the first years, as they continue, it will become more pronounced. In Angola, most of the lesson time was taken up with students copying notes from the blackboard, ignoring the fact that only a few of the children could read. Learning outcomes in project schools in Nepal and Afghanistan were significantly better than those of comparison schools when controlling for other factors. And by learning outcomes, it's maybe the more narrow definition in terms of literacy and numeracy. In Southern Sudan, teacher training level did not appear to make a difference in learning outcomes. And there was a high level of student absenteeism observed in most of the case countries, but in South Sudan in particular, 60% of enrolled students were not there on the days that lessons were being observed. This is just a picture from the Angola evaluation. This, on the far side, is what the teacher has written on the blackboard in terms of, you know, the class, the name of the school, the title of the subject for that class, and a bit of text underneath. And this is what I guess a lot of the students in that particular classroom have spent their time doing, which is trying to copy that. And because it's in it's in writing, it seems to be difficult for them to differentiate single letters and to understand what they're writing. And you can kind of get the sense that there is an attempt to kind of copy the script without really knowing what the words and what it means. And this was an observation that was particularly found in Angola. And then in terms of providing a safe learning environment, in Nepal, Save the Children has demonstrated that by working with the community, parents and children within the school and outside of the school, that they were able to reduce violence in the school and other impediments to learning. In fact, the project schools were open on average 12 days longer than than the comparison schools, and I think increasing the teacher-student contact was one of the findings of the evaluation, and ensuring that the other issue around schools of zones of peace is that Save the Children had a long history in Nepal, and so it was easier to do that in areas where we had significant community engagement over a long period of time. When we tried to move into new areas as the conflict shifted and moved, it was more difficult to establish that kind of discussion and community engagement. In terms of corporal punishment, the issue of corporal punishment, there was evidence of physical punishment observed in some of the schools supported by Save the Children in all 4 countries. So it was there to some degree in all 4 countries. In Nepal, only in one of the 16 schools that we worked with, it was observed or reported. But in Angola, 10 out of the 14 schools had evidence of corporal punishment. The evaluation also discovered that training on child rights alone, which is something that Save the Children does a fair bit, training on child rights was not sufficient to remove physical punishment from schools, and that one of the key interventions that was successful in reducing corporal punishment was kind of coming at it from various issues. So teacher training, not just training, but also alternatives in terms of classroom management, participatory development of a school code of conduct rather than just kind of handing or suggesting a code of conduct, and then student-led surveys on student participation and identifying the reasons that students drop out. In terms of facilitating participation, Save the Children did support the formation and training of student councils in Afghanistan, and almost all of the project schools that we worked with had a school council, 11 out of the 12, whereas only 1 of the 6 comparison schools did. In terms of the participation of parents, again, that was quite high, 11 out of the 12 project schools, and 9 of the PTAs had undertaken specific activities to improve their school structures. One of the findings from the evaluation is that training to student and parent groups tended to be more effective when it was followed or supported by a concrete action. So PTAs were given, small funds in which they could use to do school improvement projects, and when children's groups were organized and then they conducted a survey or they did a health to health education project, that seemed to be more effective than just trying to mobilize people without that action. But then participation of mothers in school life remained a challenge. So there were only 4 of the 12 project schools visited had mothers on their PTAs, despite some of them being girls' schools. In terms of girls' education, in all of the case country studies, it was found that girls lagged behind boys, both in enrollment and learning outcomes, as measured by the learning assessment test that was given in the evaluation. In Southern Sudan, only 20% of the students were female. The dropout rates for girls was higher than it was for boys, and boys scored higher in the mathematics and the reading comprehension activity in the evaluation. There was also an acute shortage of female teachers in Afghanistan, Angola, and Southern Sudan, not so much in Nepal. And in terms of accelerated learning programs, the evaluation did emphasize that alternative schooling models can help children who otherwise might be marginalized from the formal school system. In Southern Sudan and Afghanistan, alternative learning programs did have a higher proportion of female learners, and girls did seem to have better learning outcomes in those schools. But the alternative learning programs were also less sustainable than the formal schools that Save the Children was supporting, and the transition of students into formal education was also a challenge. So just to sum up some of the key findings, in Angola, around half of the children tested could not read a word in a Portuguese text. In Nepal, a quarter of the children tested could not read a single word in a Nepali text. In Southern Sudan, of children tested, girls' reading accuracy was lower than boys. And in Afghanistan, there did seem to be a higher level of performance in the Save the Children supported schools than in the comparison schools. So just in terms of how we're hoping that we can use the findings from this evaluation, we are preparing an executive summary report and a midterm report that goes into the findings in much greater detail. We're hoping that we can share the lessons learned from this evaluation with other communities of practice through conferences like this, and there have already been some that Save the Children members have participated in to try to share some of the findings. In terms of the findings at the country level, there has been a lot of effort to discuss those at the country level with our program offices and the program teams, and to try to develop action plans that might address some of the findings that have been found. And to support that, there was a series of recommendations that the evaluation, the midterm evaluation made, and there were a series of 10. I won't highlight them all. But one was a stronger focus on literacy development in the early years to prevent the children from continuing to have difficulty as they progress through grades. For programs not to just target girls' access, but also to target learning outcomes for girls. And that Save the Children should maintain a broad portfolio of interventions, because particularly in conflict-affected countries where we're working, there's a wide range of contexts even across an individual country. So changing security situations, new developments. So there's really a need for the ability to be flexible and to implement what is most relevant in that context. So thank you.